Well, hey guys, this is Steven and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to continue with part 2 of my introduction to caricature carving. We're going to be talking about wood choice, how to finish your carvings, and just general tips and techniques. Okay, so first let's talk about wood choice. And my preferred choice of wood for caricature carving is by far got to be basswood. I think that's kind of the consensus with most wood carvers in this community. Basswood seems to be the choice. Although I have heard other carvers talk about eastern white pine. I haven't tried that yet. I have watched some videos and that seems to carve pretty well. Also poplar, you can buy that in dowels, at your local box store or craft store. You can also, I hear the butternut, and I have carved butternut. I haven't really carved it for caricature carving though, because the grain is so nice. I'd rather use butternut for something like a coffee scoop. So I've got another video where I use butternut to carve a coffee scoop. But generally basswood is the choice that I like to go with. Now some carvers will carve out of green wood, and you've probably seen this carving right here. I carved this out of a piece of crepe myrtle, and I don't know that I would recommend crepe myrtle. It's a little bit hard, even when it's green, but it does seem to hold detail pretty well, and so I liked how those turned out. I don't know what this particular wood is, but this was a back scratcher that I carved a while back. And so yeah, it can be very fun to carve these caricatures from green wood. However, I don't have a whole lot of experience doing it with green wood. So let's talk about basswood a little bit. The grain is considered a hardwood. It's got closed grain, somewhat interlocking grain, and so it does take detail pretty well. It's generally soft though, and that's why carvers like it. It's generally easier to carve. It doesn't really have, if you can see here, it doesn't have a very stunning grain, visible grain pattern to it. That's why carvers generally will paint these when they finish carving them, because really it doesn't showcase the grain very well, although some will, finish it with their acrylic paints and then water it down to show a little bit of grain, but generally the grain does not show through. It's not all that stunning. From what I've read and gathered, northern basswood seems to be the best for knife carving. I like to purchase my blocks from 3 different suppliers. Probably the first choice is Morewood and Rough Outs. This is where I got this block right here, and Treeline USA. You can now buy 1x1 by 12 inch blocks from them, and this is also Treeline. This is 1.5 by 1.5, I think. And then Beavercraft, you can buy boxes of 10 to 20 of these, I think, from Beavercraft. These are already 1x1 and cut down to 6 inches. So I did the math, and as of this videotaping, when you kind of compare these 3 different vendors for a 1x1 by 6 inch block, Beavercraft was coming out at somewhere around $1.25 for this block. Treeline, if you cut this down to 6 inches, it was coming out to somewhere around $1.50 for a 1 inch by 1 inch by 6 inch block. And really the winner, I think, is Morewood and Rough Out. And this is a 2x2 by 12 inch block. So when you cut it all down, what I'll do is take it to my bandsaw. You'll get about 8 1x1 by 6 blocks, and that comes out to be around 45 cents a block. So another good example of, if you buy these in bigger sizes and you've got a bandsaw or a table saw or something that you can cut them down, it's generally going to come out cheaper per unit. So just keep that in mind. Okay guys, let's talk about finishing your carving. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because there's a lot of other good videos out there on finishing carvings. I'm by no means an expert, but just the basics here. Please comment if you've got a finishing tip that's your favorite. Would love to hear what you like to do. Remember how we said that basswood is a pretty plain looking wood. The grain is not really that, visibly it's not very substantial. So painting a carving really will bring the carving to life, in my opinion. And that's what you're trying to do, is add a little bit more, trying to add a little bit more creativity to your carving by, painting it. Most people like to use acrylic paint. It's water-based. It's very easy to clean up. Now you can find these acrylic paints at most of your craft stores, or even big stores like Walmart will sell it. But what I would recommend is buy a pack of the primary colors. So here's like blue and red, but you can buy a pack of all the primary colors, because I guarantee you when you go to look for these paints, there's a dizzying amount of these kind of paints. They go by all kind of different names, different shades, and different things like that. But if you want to just start out with the primary colors, you can always mix the primary colors to come up with something, in between or different color. But as you get into this, then then you can start experimenting with other paints that are out there. Now another thing, so you can apply this paint directly to the wood. Sometimes, or a lot of times, that's what I will do. But a lot of people like to dilute the paint with a few drops of water, or dab their brush in the water, and then kind of create a little bit of a stain, so that some of the wood grain will show through. Now acrylic paints dry very fast, relatively fast. Don't get an oil-based paint. I recommend you don't do that, because it takes forever for oil-based paints to dry. And even with the acrylics, if you get impatient, hair dryer is a great way to speed up the process. A little cheap hair dryer to have in your shop is what I use. Some carvings, like this owl, you can finish it in an oil. This particular carving, I just dumped in some Danish oil, and you can use other oils like linseed, flaxseed oil. Just make sure that you clean up your rags appropriately so they don't self-combust. And then what I'll do is I'll let that oil soak in, and then I'll come back and I'll paint some of the features like eyes or beaks or whatever I want to highlight. That's what I did here with the owl. Now another thing you can do if you want, I like to apply DuraClear, this DuraClear Ultra Matte. It's clear finish over the top of my acrylic paint. It just gives it a little bit added protection. It's ultra matte, so it's not real super glossy or anything like that. I personally don't like super glossy, carvings. The other thing that I will do is I'll use an antiquing wax. I think I got this one at Michael's, but this is a dark wax, and when you first put it on, you'll think it's crazy because you don't know what's happening. You're just totally darkening your carving. But what you have to do is put it on and start wiping it off immediately. And what happens is that the antiquing wax gets down in these crevices, and you can pretty much wipe it off the acrylic paint, although it will leave the acrylic paint a little grittier, a little darker. And I kind of like that effect. Some people don't, especially around these light areas and white paint. You may not want to get the antiquing wax directly on that. If you want these colors to really pop out, you may not want to do that, but you could selectively put it, say, on beards and anywhere where you want to get into cracks and crevices. So I like to use it. I use it selectively. And again, you got to put this on and you got to wipe it off immediately. Now for paint brushes, don't go out and spend a whole lot of money on paint brushes. I like to get these little red paint brushes from Michael's, and you can get them cheaper than these, or you can buy even more expensive ones, but I like to buy them with different tips, some with wide tips here, some with really fine detail, if I'm trying to paint an eye or something like that, and then maybe something like this one or bigger to cover bigger area on the carving. So you want to have just a variety. You can usually buy these in variety packs, or you can buy them individually. I also like to use this little pallet or container to put my paints in. Of course, you can mix your primary paints together, get different colors, and acrylic paint's easy to clean up. I love to just let the paint dry in here, because the next day or next time I do my carving, it's so satisfying to pull the paint out. I don't know why that's so satisfying, but it is kind of fun, because it'll just, once it's all dried up, it'll just pull out perfectly, and you'll have a clean palette again. All right, let's say a quick word about safety, and I probably should have led with this, because if you're a beginner carver, this is ultra important that you are doing this safely. Always start with a sharp knife. A sharp knife is safer than a dull knife, so always begin there. And when I started carving, I wore these carving gloves on both hands, and I would recommend, if you're new to this, that you start with wearing these on both hands. I like this particular brand made by Pyramex, and you can order these through Amazon pretty easily. I like these because they're flexible, and they have this grippy material on here that helps me hold the block better in my hand. Some carving gloves are kind of slippery, to be honest with you, and it's kind of hard to hold the block. Now, when I got comfortable doing this, I graduated to just keeping the carving glove on the left hand, and I will tape these two fingers up on the right. You can buy this carving tape from a woodworking store. They have special carving tape, or what I do is I just buy this from the local drugstore, and it's a little bit cheaper. You've got about 5 yards here, so you know, that's what I do. That's what I would recommend if you want to save a little money. But also, don't forget to have some Band-Aids on hand, or a first aid kit, because if you mess around with carving long enough, something's going to happen, and hopefully you won't get seriously cut, but it's always good to have this on hand if you do get a nick or a small slice. Hope that won't happen, so just continue to carve and be safe. Okay, now guys, in this section I'm going to talk about some general tips and techniques for those that are getting started in the caricature carving. As we've said before in part 1, go and find some easy 1x1 block type projects, and we talked a little bit more about that in part 1. I'll leave some more links to some YouTube videos that will be helpful to get started. Another one I forgot about was the Moravian Star project, and I've got a video on making these, and I'll have a link in the description below. But this is a good little project to play around with if you're starting out and you're learning a little bit about grain direction and your stop cuts. Just a great little, and they make great little Christmas ornaments as well. And as we stated, you can find some easy patterns before just by doing some Google searching, and patterns are all over the place. Don't forget stropping your knife and keeping your knife sharp. This is probably one of the basic things. So it's very important to start with a sharp knife, and hopefully I will do a separate video on knife sharpening here shortly. Practice your cuts, particularly, you know, the stop cut. You know, majority of your cuts in doing caricature carving is going to be the stop cut. So if you can master that and get used to doing that, that will be a big plus. But go check out my carving technique video that I just did a little while back, and it'll cover some other tips on carving, especially about grain direction and some of the other cuts that you'll be using for carving. I would recommend, you know, carve deep when you need to. That will keep your carving a lot cleaner. You won't have to come back and make other cuts to keep cleaning it up. Always cut features bigger than you expect. For example, features like a nose or maybe an arm. This one doesn't have any arms, but you know, start big, because you can always, you can't add wood back, right? You can cut wood down, but you can't add it back. Also use the, let's see, where is it? If you need to, use the V-tool, as we've said before, and you can go back and clean up some of these stop cuts if you need to. If you do mess up, don't worry. As we said before, these little basswood blocks are pretty cheap. And what you can do is you can simply start over. Here's another tip, just turn the block around, okay? You can start on the back side. A lot of times people will cut these in half anyway, so you can carve whatever you want to on this half of the block. So, you know, if you mess up on this side, turn it around. But again, you can always start over on a new block. They're real cheap. As you're starting to carve, you know, as you start getting into it, yeah, it's going to be a little bit chaotic. In fact, you know, when I first got into it and I got to this point, I was saying, man, this is not looking like much of a carving, and I was almost, you know, ready to give up. But you got to always see your carving all the way through and to the end. And even when you get to the end and it's starting to look like something, it's still, you know, until you start painting it, you know, see it through to the end. That includes the painting. That way, you know, this thing is going to pop out and become a real character in the end. And don't worry about getting things perfect. If you're following someone else's pattern or video, don't stress out if yours doesn't turn out exactly like theirs. That's totally okay. You know, I can just be honest here as a YouTuber, I don't always show all the hardships and mistakes on my videos, because they would become ultra long videos, to be honest with you. So I do sometimes will cut those mistakes out. Another thing, since a lot of these carvings are going to end up on your shelf or on your table as figurines, don't forget to leave enough space down here so that it can lay flat. You know, and I've done that before. I've forgotten to leave a flat surface down here, and then it, you know, all of a sudden I can't stand it up on a shelf anywhere. I would say continue to challenge yourself and get better. You know, the more you do this, you'll find that you can change your carvings up. You can begin creating carvings with different facial expressions, different features, and really kind of create your own unique style. So practice, practice, practice. I hope you enjoyed this video and will be challenged to get into caricature carving. Take your time and have fun. Enjoy it, okay? And please take a minute and like and subscribe to the video. Oh yeah, one more thing. Also find carving clubs in your community if that's available. It's always good to learn with others, you know, firsthand, build those relationships. If you're, you know, an extrovert, I tend to be an introvert, but if you're an extrovert, maybe you want to be around others and kind of build a friendship or relationship. Please, you know, in the comments, leave questions, or please leave your own tips, you know, that have helped you along the way. And we appreciate you watching. We'll see you in the next video.